Hello, and thank you for tuning in from Good to Great Teaching Methods for the 21st Century. My name is Issata Oluwadare, and I'll be your presenter for this session. Throughout this session, you can expect us to talk about the changing demographics in higher education, achieving equity within the classroom, the five diverse learning styles, and tools that you can use today to start engaging your students within an online environment. A little bit about me. I'm a two-time Rutgers grad. My undergraduate majors were poli-sci and Africana studies. I obtained a master's in social work from the Rutgers School of Social Work with an emphasis on public and nonprofit management. And I'm currently pursuing a doctoral degree within Graduate School of Education with an emphasis on education, culture, and society. I am a first-gen immigrant and a college student, the mother of a school-age son with special needs, and the former caregiver for a brother diagnosed with autism who is now aged out of the education system. I've spent the past 15 years working within diverse learning environments within higher education, ranging from residence life, working with opportunity programs in and outside of the classroom space, as well as now as the Associate Dean for Student Support and Inclusive Communities with the Honors College of Rutgers, New Brunswick. I also serve as an instructor with the Department of Africana Studies and had the privilege of teaching Rutgers Burn seminars within an online and in person environment. I want to spend a moment to address the changing demographics in higher education and how that impacts the way that we educate and support students. Increasingly diverse racial and ethnic student body, non traditional students, socioeconomic factors, the rise of first gen students, or even the fact that, students who are not necessarily first gen are facing financial challenges that can impact their ability to focus on coursework. The rise of international, undocumented, and transfer students, and last but certainly not least or exhaustive, the fact that there is an increase of students with disabilities entering the college space, entering research universities such as Rutgers University, and our ability to support and engage them is key and essential. Why does all of this matter, right? I'm going to go back to the screen really quickly. If you step into a classroom, there's a potential that you're going to engage some, if not all, of these factors, depending on the size of your course and how broad your social science or humanities course is. This means that inclusion and success has to begin with the syllabus. We have to begin planning syllabi with the end in mind, right? When I am planning a syllabus, I think about if I had a classroom space where all of these students were included, what would I need to include in my syllabus that helps them to feel supported, ensures that information is clear, ensures the information is well organized so that they know where to start and what is expected of them in the particular course, right? So that means clearly defining my office hours. For me in an online environment, those are by appointment only. I use a platform called Microsoft Booking or sometimes Calendly for students to be able to meet with me. I make sure that I clearly outline assignments, giving details, and when possible, a rubric that will help students know how to be successful in that particular assignment. I try to ensure that assignments are building on one another, right? So that there's continuity, the flow of that syllabus makes sense, that there's a progression throughout the semester, and most importantly, ensuring that I'm diversifying the kinds of articles, the writers, being thoughtful about who the authors are, who are the narrators in documentaries that I'm sharing, because I want students to be able to see or um, feel themselves at some point during the semester. May not be every day, but at some point, as someone who is teaching Africana studies, I want those students to see themselves reflected in the material and for it to be relevant for the present age. An online environment does not eliminate the need to consider the external factors that students may be facing and their implications for student engagement. One of the things that I was shocked to learn as an educator is how many students are engaging in full-time curriculum and also have full-time jobs and what that means for them. I know when I went to college, I certainly didn't have to have a full-time job. I did have a job as a first-gen student. I needed to make some money, but to learn that students are literally stretched thin even when they are within what we consider traditionally college-age student brackets. So it's trying to be sensitive, and I highly encourage doing a pre-course survey to just get a sense of who my students are, and the varying needs that they might be bringing into the courses. So, for example, if I'm teaching a writing intensive or research intensive coursework, I'm going to ask them about the various elements of that course and how comfortable they feel with that information to start. So I know what the baseline is going in. Is it a foolproof method? Not necessarily, because sometimes we have a tendency to um, assess ourselves and think we understand concepts a little bit more than we do, but at least lets me know how confident the students feel about the material before they come into the course. I also ask students if there's anything that I should know that might hinder their success in this course, right? Do you have a learning disability? Are you working full time? Are you a caregiver at home? Especially now coming out of the pandemic, these factors can impact the student's ability to focus or meet deadlines. And so, doing a pre course survey before finalizing the syllabus completely will help you create a more customized and unique learning experience for the particular class in that semester. The important thing to know is that, we absolutely cannot meet every need all the time. However, a little bit of thoughtfulness will go a long way. And so I highly recommend putting a little bit more thought into the pre planning of the syllabus and customizing it for that particular demographic of student that you're going to be teaching for the semester. A concept that I want to cover before moving forward is universal design. Universal design has been designed by the Center for Applied Special Technology and really talks about the way we engage students, represent information, and how we allow students to demonstrate the learning of that information. When it comes to engagement, it is important to acknowledge that learners differ significantly in the way that they want to engage with information and their motivation to learn. There are various sources that can influence an individual's affect and their perception of the environment, whether that be online or in person. And so it's quite subjective, right? For example, some students love a spontaneous course environment, while others are really frightened by that fact. So it's important to know that when it comes to student engagement, to not expect a one size fits all model or all students responding in the same way. For example, I've seen students who would sit in the course and not say a word the entire class. So when I go and look at their online discussions, they have so many great ideas and thoughts. And so it's being open to the fact that some people just prefer not to engage in large groups or in discussion heavy courses, even if it's a seminar. Is there another way that we might be able to engage those students in an online environment, be it through journaling or reflective writing or online discussion boards that provide a little bit more structures for students who prefer a stricter routine? There is no one size fits all engagement, and that is optimal for everyone. I think what's important is throughout the semester to try to provide something that does work for everyone at some point. So they have an opportunity to demonstrate or to engage in a way that is optimal for them. Another thing to keep in mind is representation, to represent information in different ways, right? Written, audible, video representation, so that different styles of learning can perceive and comprehend the information that they're sharing. This is incredibly important as we see different learning disabilities within the classroom environment, such as dyslexia or different language and cultural differences. And so it may require a different approach to presenting content. Others in your class may grasp information quicker and more efficiently through visual or auditory means than printed text. Can we think about diversifying each topical area that we cover when we are designing a social science and humanities based syllabus so that each of those learners can receive that information the way that best works for them? Finally, action and expression. And this essentially is how we assess learning and how we allow students to express what they have learned within the course. We all learn differently, and as such, based on our personalities, we're going to share what we've learned in a different way. I think a good example of that is if everyone has to take a standardized test or a blue book exam, there are certain people who are going to do extremely well with that, right? There are others who are going to excel better with oral presentations or being able to create a visual. aid for the work that they learned. Some of the things that you might want to consider is, can you give opportunities for reading, writing, and verbal presentation or visual presentation for students to share what they've learned throughout the semester? Can there be small assignments given throughout the course that would allow students to express what they've learned or what you've just presented? Because some research does show that the best way for us to learn things is being able to teach it to others, right? So this is where instead of you lecturing for the entire class session, maybe breaking students up into groups and allowing them to present to one another material that you already know and possibly correct and add to, but it gives them an opportunity to act and express on what was shared with them. I'm also going to share a chart within the resources file that gives you a little bit more insight in universal design and how you can incorporate it in your everyday lesson planning. The other thing to consider is an inclusive framework, and some questions to ask ourselves when we're designing framework is, to what extent does course information account for students' existing knowledge, personal connection, and background on the topic? This is easier in some courses than others, but one of the things that I try to do is, if I'm covering a topic that seems abstract, can I make it real for students using any pop culture references that I see in the media or that I know might directly affect them in the moment. A great way to do that sometimes is to start with a good Google or YouTube search and put in some keywords and see if anything interesting that you can at least make a connection with a course topic or course issue that seems complex. Another thing to keep in mind is to use diverse examples that are relevant to student interests and identities, right? One of the things that I love doing is doing the pre-class survey and getting a sense of who's in there, looking at my roster. I'm looking at the visualization of that roster, asking students on the first day of class where they're from, their interests, why are you taking this class? I like to know my audience because knowing the audience gives me more insight in how I can make more meaningful class sessions for them. You want to encourage active participation from all students, right? If you're like me, I'm the student who shows up in class and I'm always engaged, I'm always talking. But there are some people who, unless you probe, may not speak an entire class session. It doesn't mean that they don't have an interest. It just means that they're maybe a little bit shy or don't appreciate speaking in large groups. Can we do a breakdown of large and small group discussions to encourage all students to participate in one way or another? Zoom is really great at creating breakout rooms and allowing students to enter into small spaces. You can always do some prompting questions for those small places and be able to jump around as an instructor to see what is happening in those small group discussions. It is so important to demonstrate empathy towards students, especially related to culturally sensitive topics. And so, a great example of that is a course that I'm teaching is health disparities in the Black community. And we are living through a COVID pandemic. And so, to be able to acknowledge that these students are impacted by the pandemic in a different way, knowing the representation of the students who are in my class is important. I want to make sure that I reflect being in touch with what I am teaching students in real life, right? Another thing that is important is incorporating perspectives, data, and theories in historical contexts with from various racial identities. So if you're covering theory, there's nothing like, for me, I remember being a political science student and sitting in and all of the theory was by dead white guys, right? Are there other theories that you can incorporate, other emerging theories that show a variance in identity, that acknowledge difference, that acknowledge the diversity of your student body, and being sensitive to that? And also incorporating different types of socioeconomic positions. This is great for classes where we're talking about current moral and social issues and how they impact different groups. For example, in a class session, I spoke with my students about the Affordable Care Act and the fact that for some people, they felt like it was helpful for low income, predominantly Black and brown communities, but others saw it as an economic disaster. And so being able to look at current moral and social issues and political issues from a different lens, and then trying to be as impartial about that as we possibly can, and allowing students to really see the full issue and historical context from, let's say, both sides of the coin. So now I want to get into the kinds of learners that might you might find in your online environment and what that means. Let's say that you were a visual learner. Visual learners learn best by graphs, looking at maps, diagrams, looking at body language. It's best to try to visualize stories, putting in blocks and numbers, and using colors and things to highlight. Visual learners will struggle if you are the kind of instructor who goes on Zoom and all of your slides look like this. That is going to be tough. They're going to feel disengaged. There needs to be some color, there needs to be some video, there needs to be some sound for someone who is a visual learner. And so I think visual learners can really struggle, with distractions because they're stimulated by what they're seeing and perceiving. What is not going to be effective for this group is reading long bodies of text and listening to lectures that have been pre-recorded, and just losing interest, right? So a visual learner might struggle if I just sent them this recording and did not have any kind of live engagement within the presentation. Other kind of learners are auditory learners. These are students who learn best by listening. They're going to thrive when they're able to ask lots of questions. They're going to thrive in class discussion or online class discussion. They're going to thrive in your breakout groups. They're going to thrive from listening to other people. What's not going to help them is this thing that works for visual, right? Unsupported images, abstract images, not being able to talk through or test abstract theories and concepts is going to be increasingly difficult. One thing about auditory learners is if you can incorporate podcasts or anything that they can listen to before the class, that would be helpful. So some of the things that I like to do is, yes, I include documentaries, but I also include podcasts, and I give students tools by which they can convert video representation into audio files solely so that they can listen through that. If you go on Google and just say, like, MP4 to MP3, it'll give you some websites where students can convert any visually represented information that has an audio soundbite and allow them to download it so that they can actually listen to it on their like cell phone with their headphones. So that's a great tool to use for auditory learners. Reading and writing. Students who thrive from reading and writing are the students who are going to thrive through your online Canvas or Blackboard discussion board. I like to have a pre class discussion question posed for each week. It ensures that students are reading the course material and preparing for the course material. It allows me to read their thoughts and think about topics that we can discuss within the classroom, and it allows those students who are less likely to be verbal in class to express themselves uninterrupted. And this has been pretty fantastic to see how students who do not utter a word in class have so much to say on discussion boards. And it's just because reading and writing is your preferred mode and style of learning. What's going to be difficult for this group is having extensive discussions where no notes are being taken, watching a demonstration without any kind of literature or supporting information, and really unstructured conversation. It's really important for them to be able to create written descriptions, to have key ideas, and to be able to engage with that information one on one, right? So they tend to be a little bit more introverted in the way that they process information. Our kinesthetic learners are people who are hands-on. How do you know you're a kinesthetic learner? You go and you get an IKEA bookcase, and as opposed to sitting down and reading the instructions, you start right away. That's me, right? I'm a person who is like, okay, I love all those visual things, but I want to get right in there, and I'm going to get my hands dirty, and I want to try for myself. And they might be learning from trial and error, right? What doesn't work for them is reading text, being told information that doesn't use concrete examples and just complicates the situation. But what is going to work for this group is being able to test things out, talk them through, tweak, and learn through real life experiences, learn through experiential learning. And so, last but certainly not least, is our multimodal learner, the learner who engages with all of the previous learning styles that I shared. This individual, I guess we could call them, right? If we're talking about right and left handed, there'd be ambidextrous. Like, depending on what the topic is, I learn a little bit differently on all things. All right. And so, most of us probably have more than one learning style. But what is important to think in mind is when we're designing course instruction to do a little something for each kind of learner within the class session. What does that look like? If let's say I am talking about a Black health issue. I might start with a hot topic discussion. I might go into a brief video. I might give students some quiet time to reflect in the class before sharing. And then I might break them out to do collaborative work and present on it as a team. At some point during that session, I'm going to engage each of these modes, and each student gets to walk away from the session taking something with them. Can you go in depth with all of them? That depends on the time that you have for the class. If it's a 3 hour seminar, that's a little bit different than an hour and 20 minutes. But it's being intentional that in any given week and meeting time that we're covering different modes of learning so that students who need to engage with information in all various ways, like your multimodal learner here, gets the opportunity to do so. So practice is important for this. And the truth of the matter is giving them the variety so that if one mode of learning is not working, they can implement others. Now, I want to give you a brief walkthrough of different tools and ways to engage these learning styles. For visual learners, documentaries, TED Talks, YouTube videos, an app called Jamboard and Google Slides are going to be really key. I personally like to design my slides on Google Slides or Canva because one, I don't have to remember the zip file. Two, they are available anywhere. And lastly, I just have to share a link in order for students to see those presentations. So Google Slides and apps like Canva are going to be truly agile. This presentation that you're watching today has been completed and recorded on Canva, but they're great visual tools that you can use in preparation for the courses and within the course to engage students. For your auditory learners, class discussions, podcasts, audiobooks. If you can choose text that does have an audio version, can we do that there? There are many smaller texts these days that also have an audible version. So I try to be intentional about getting books that are also accessible in print, online digitally, and then also in audio format for those students who are auditory learners. And then being able to convert the video clips into audible resources. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of free online conversion tools that you can find just by doing a Google search that'll help students take almost any video and convert it into an MP3 that they can download and listen to on the go. This is particularly helpful for students who are non traditional students, right? They might be reading or listening to course material on their way to and from work, and just providing this flexibility gives them another way to engage with the material. For those who are readers and writers, we want to think about online discussion boards, Jamboard, which I'm going to walk through, short reflective writing pieces, and then software like Poll Everywhere that allows them to type and assess learning within the class without having to verbalize their thoughts and ideas. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to use Poll Everywhere to be able to engage reading and writing learning styles. And then finally, kinesthetic, in class collaborative assignments, preparing and presenting information, being able to engage in peer review and engage with their fellow classmates, and using fun gamifying tools such as Kahoot will be really fun for this particular learner. So let's go through each one of these softwares and what they do. So, Kahoot is a game based learning platform that makes it easy for you to create, share, and play learning games or trivia quizzes in minutes. So, you can pre design your Kahoot before you go in, send students a code that they can download on their phone, on their app, or use on their computer. And those results will pop up on the screen in live real time, and you even get to ascribe winners and see a leaderboard on there. Now you're going to notice in the PDF version of this that this live link is going to be clickable for you to go see what I think is a comprehensive beginner's tutorial on Kahoot. So don't feel afraid if you're like, wait a minute, how do I make this pretty design? I want to do this gamifying aspect, but I don't know how. I am including tutorials for you to be able to watch and test it out on your own. The next tool that I want to talk about is Jamboard. Jamboard is a pretty fun online collaborative tool that allows students who are visual and reading writing learners to engage with course materials. So I might use Jamboard by posing a question directly related to the topic that we're covering and then sending students in real time within the course meeting or my Zoom meeting the editable link to my Jamboard and ask them to use these various colored Post-its to share their interests, their views on whatever we're talking about. So this particular Jamboard is talking about successes and frustrations with collaborative projects, and students are able to add visuals and add these post-it notes along with using so many other features. So I'm also going to be sharing the visual for Jamboard, the tutorial for Jamboard, in order for you to test it out on your own. Poll Everywhere is a great assessment tool. It's a great way to get a pulse of how students are feeling. It's a great mid-semester evaluation. It also allows you to create word clouds where students can put in the general feelings or impressions that they're having about whatever topic you are uh, covering at the moment. Again, I will feature the link for you to be able to watch a thorough tutorial on how to create your own poll everywhere. And the fun thing about poll everywhere is it can be used on mobile phones, laptops, or desktops. More and more, I'm noticing that students are using their mobile phones when we're on Zoom calls. And so it's a good idea to try to choose software that students don't have to have a desktop or like a camera to engage in the class. Reasons being, with the diverse learning community that we have in place, everyone may not always have these tools accessible. And sometimes honestly, Wi-Fi fails and people have to use their 5G connection to get on the actual class session. And so anything that you can use that allows students to switch from screen to screen and possibly use their mobile phone is likely to get more engagement. Last but certainly not least, I want to talk about utilizing Google Slides as a form of collaborative learning. Some fun ways that you can use Google Slides is deciding to break students into groups, having them do a brief in class presentation and present as a group to the remainder of the class. So, some great ways to use that, let's say we're using a history course, is assigning a period of history or based on whatever topic you're studying or teaching that week to students, allowing them to be in groups of 3 or 4 and create their own visual representation, an understanding of that era, and then being able to present it to the larger group. It gives your kinesthetic learners an opportunity to actively engage with the coursework. It ensures that they're going to retain that information. And furthermore, it helps us engage in what I like to say is a Socratic learning method. Yes, I'm the instructor. I could go through all of these topics by myself, but I prefer to allow students to learn from one another. And sometimes even I learn different things from them by allowing them to engage with Google Slides. Google Slides can be used for so many things other than just presenting information. I've done Kahoot style games on here. I've done trivia games. I've gamified course sessions using Google Slides. You're able to embed videos. You're able to embed your Jamboards, and so it's a really great on the go tool that is great for the instructor, but also good for your hands on learners and being able to support and promote collaborative learning. This being said, that concludes today's presentation. I hope these tools were helpful for you. You can find me at sasata@rutgers.edu. And as I mentioned, there's a resource folder and clickable links on the PDF of this presentation to take you to the tutorials for all of the tools that I have shared. Have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of the conference.